It was a chilly evening, the kind of evening where the golden glow of streetlights battled against the shadows of the city. The roads were busy, cars lined up at traffic signals, horns occasionally blaring as impatient drivers tried to cut through the heavy congestion. Among the many vehicles waiting at a red light was a sleek black sedan. Inside sat a man named Daniel, a successful businessman in his mid-30s. He wore a crisp suit, his wristwatch glimmering under the faint city light, his face composed but tired after a long day at work. Daniel had everything most people dream of: wealth, influence, and respect. But even with all that, his life often felt mechanical, as though he was simply ticking off boxes in a checklist rather than living fully. That night, he was driving home from a particularly long meeting, his mind cluttered with numbers, deals, and deadlines. He had been staring absent-mindedly at the red traffic light when something unusual caught his attention. Out of the corner of his eye, Daniel noticed a figure moving slowly between the rows of cars. A beggar, but not just any beggar. She was a frail-looking woman, dressed in tattered clothes, her hair messy and streaked with dust, her hands trembling slightly as she stretched them out towards the car windows. One by one, the drivers rolled their windows up tighter or waved her away, too consumed with their own worlds to offer her more than a glance. Daniel wasn't usually the type to engage either. He had grown up in the city and had seen countless beggars at every street corner. He often told himself that it was impossible to help them all. But something about this woman made him pause. Her eyes. When she came closer to his car, Daniel noticed her eyes shining under the streetlight. They weren't the dull, lifeless eyes of someone completely defeated by the world. No, there was something hauntingly familiar about them, something that sent a strange chill down his spine. As she reached his window, Daniel hesitated. He usually kept his window firmly shut, but this time his hand seemed to move on its own. He pressed the button, and the glass slowly slid down. Cold air rushed in, carrying with it the faint smell of dust and smoke from the street. The woman bent slightly, her face now visible in the dim light. And that's when it happened. Daniel froze, his breath caught in his throat. The face that stared back at him was one he thought he would never see again. For a moment, he couldn't believe it. His mind scrambled for explanations. The woman's gaunt cheeks, the dirt that clung to her skin, and the hollow look of someone who had endured unbearable hardship couldn't hide the truth from him. He knew this face. It was Rebecca. Rebecca, his childhood friend. The girl who had once lived next door to him, who had shared her dreams with him under starlit skies, who had promised they would conquer the world together. They had gone to the same school, laughed over the silliest jokes, and even comforted each other during the hardest of times. But life had taken them on different paths. Daniel's family had prospered, moving up in the world, while Rebecca's family had struggled. Still, she had always been bright, ambitious, and full of life. The last he had heard, she had moved to another city for university. And now, here she was, begging on the streets. Daniel's mind spun in disbelief. Could it really be her? He whispered her name softly, almost afraid that if he spoke too loudly, the fragile image in front of him might shatter. "Rebecca," he asked. Her eyes widened at the sound of his voice. For a moment, she seemed startled, as if she hadn't expected anyone to recognize her beneath the layers of poverty and despair. Slowly, she nodded. Her lips trembled as she whispered back, "Daniel." The traffic light turned green, and the cars behind Daniel honked impatiently. But he didn't care. The world around him faded. All he could see was Rebecca standing there, her hands trembling, her eyes moist as memories rushed back between them. He quickly pulled his car to the side of the road, ignoring the irritated drivers. He motioned for her to come with him. At first, she hesitated, her eyes darting nervously as though afraid of judgment or rejection. But Daniel's gaze was steady, filled not with pity but with concern, with recognition. Slowly, she walked towards the car, and Daniel opened the passenger door. As she stepped inside, Daniel noticed the faint scent of dust and exhaustion clinging to her, but he didn't mind. For him, this was no stranger. This was Rebecca. For several moments, silence hung heavy between them. Daniel gripped the steering wheel tightly, trying to find the right words. Finally, he turned to her and asked, "How did this happen?" Rebecca lowered her gaze, her fingers fidgeting nervously in her lap. Her voice was soft, barely audible, but each word carried the weight of 1,000 untold stories. "It's a long story, Daniel," she said. And so, as Daniel drove aimlessly through the city streets, Rebecca began to share her journey. A journey that would reveal not only the cruelty of fate but also the resilience of the human spirit. She told him about how her family had struggled financially after her father passed away unexpectedly. Her mother had worked tirelessly to keep them afloat, but opportunities were scarce. Still, Rebecca had been determined to succeed. She had gotten into university with a scholarship and had big dreams of becoming a lawyer. For a while, it seemed like everything was falling into place. But then, life unraveled. Her mother fell gravely ill, and the medical bills piled up. Rebecca tried to manage her studies while working multiple jobs, but the pressure became unbearable. She was forced to drop out to care for her mother, who eventually passed away. Alone and with no support system, Rebecca found herself sinking deeper into poverty. She moved from one low-paying job to another, each time struggling to make ends meet. And then, as misfortune often comes in waves, she lost her job, her small apartment, and eventually, everything she had. She had been living on the streets for months, surviving only on scraps and the rare kindness of strangers. Her voice broke as she confessed how humiliating it felt to beg, how every day was a battle between hope and despair. Daniel listened, his heart aching with every word. He couldn't believe how someone so full of potential, someone who had once dreamed so big, had been reduced to this. He felt a lump in his throat as guilt gnawed at him. Where had he been all these years? Why hadn't he tried to find her, to check on her? But Rebecca didn't blame him. She looked at him with tired eyes and said, "Life has its ways, Daniel. Sometimes it lifts you up, sometimes it tears you down." As she spoke, Daniel realized something profound. Success and failure were often separated by the thinnest of lines, lines that circumstances, not always effort, drew. And at that moment, he made a silent promise to himself. He would not let Rebecca's story end this way. Daniel asked her if she trusted him. She looked at him for a long moment, searching his eyes, and finally nodded. And so began a new chapter in both their lives. Daniel took Rebecca to a safe place for the night, a small guest house where she could sleep in a clean bed and take a warm shower. He gave her new clothes, food, and the comfort of knowing she was no longer alone. For Rebecca, it felt surreal, as if she had stepped out of one life and into another overnight. For Daniel, it was a chance at redemption, a chance to make up for the years they had lost. Days turned into weeks, and Rebecca slowly began to heal. With Daniel's support, she regained her strength, her dignity, and eventually, her confidence. He helped her reconnect with education programs, encouraged her to start small steps toward rebuilding her life, and reminded her that her dreams were still alive, waiting for her. And through it all, something deeper grew between them. What had once been childhood friendship slowly blossomed into something stronger, forged through shared memories and new beginnings. But that part of the story is for another time. What matters here is this: sometimes, the faces we pass by on the streets, the ones we dismiss without a second thought, carry stories that could shake us to our core. Sometimes, behind the dirt and despair lies a soul we once knew, a person who once had dreams, laughter, and love, just like us. Daniel had opened his car window that night thinking it was just another beggar. But what he found was a piece of his past, a reminder of how fragile life can be, and how powerful kindness truly is. And maybe, just maybe, the world would be a better place if we all paused long enough to open our windows too. So what would you have done if you were in Daniel's place? Would you have rolled down the window, or would you have turned away? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to like and share this story if it touched your heart. Until next time, remember this: behind every face is a story, and sometimes, that story might just change your life forever.